So I went to my first meet and greet, met an author, talked to him about his book, and not just that, met a lot of fellow Bookstagrammers and totally had fun. So this was my first meet and greet, and I'd love to take you all on a vlog of that and also review the book that I read as a part of this meet and greet. Hi everyone, I'm Ashna Balasubramaniam and welcome to my YouTube channel. And now without any further delay, let's move on to the synopsis of the story and then I'll take you on a vlog. So Gautam is the protagonist of the story. So Gautam as a young boy has moved to Arunachal Pradesh from the plains. So Gautam is living with his family and his younger sister. As a young boy, he kind of was intimidated by his dad, who was a revolutionary, okay? So his dad talked a lot about the strains between India and China and how India was actually impacted by the strain that was caused because of this. So they actually lived just away from the border and the threat was always looming over them. So how their lives were shaped because of that and the political aspect of it is mentioned as a part of this book. So this book is set somewhere between the 1960s till the 1990s. So Gautam as a young boy is still exploring himself and he finds a fondness for writing poems, and during this time he meets a girl called Shiring. So they're all like 10 years old and Shiring is a really cute girl, a really adorable character in the book, and Shiring makes a sacrifice, okay? Shiring makes a sacrifice, a very unexpected sacrifice that impacts Gautam in such a way that it's something that he carries with him for the rest of his life. So the impact of whatever happened with Shiring actually made Gautam go into a boarding school. So when he goes into a boarding school, he now falls in love with a girl called Mary. So Mary is a tribal Christian girl and Gautam is a Hindu boy. So obviously during that time, this is set in the 1960s, 70s, 80s and 90s, right? So obviously during that time, there was a lot of opposition from the other side, people opposing the fact that a Christian and a Hindu boy are falling in love. So that opposition is there, and because of which they also kind of grow apart and the distance also sets in. You get to see a lot of political aspects in the book. You get to see a lot of religious aspects. I feel like the author has explored a lot of topics and he has just blended it into the story so that it just kind of seamlessly integrates into it. So when I read it, it felt totally like a part of the story, okay? So it didn't seem like, okay, there is a distinct political element, there is a distinct religious element, and not just that, he explores a lot about Hindustani music and things like that, and how Gautam's life, once he moves into a metropolitan city, how it shapes him. Like he wants to just climb the corporate ladder. Of course, it's not like we all are like this, all of us in the metropolitan city. But Gautam in particular, he got caught into this trap where he just wanted to climb the corporate ladder. He wanted to become rich quickly, just like a lot of people who kind of aspire for it nowadays, if you see on social media actually. So yeah, he wanted to get rich quickly, and during this process he loses a lot of values that he was imbibed with, okay? A lot of values that he took for granted, he kind of loses all of that. And Mary is there, he has left behind Mary there at a very distant place, they've grown apart. And then comes the climax of the story. Something very distinct happens. It's a huge calamity that takes place in his life, and Gautam is suddenly left questioning all his choices. Suddenly left feeling like he did all of these things just for nothing, and then he has to go back to us. He has to try and take accountability for whatever he did. He's trying to go back to his roots so that he can actually rectify the situation that he caused in the first place. So these are some of the things that happen in the book. And not just that, this book also talks a lot about mythological aspects surrounding that area, how Gautam goes back into these roots. So the thing is, Gautam going back to find Mary and a lot of things that ensue, that is what this book is all about. So this is not a typical romance novel. So this book has a lot of politics. It will break you in a lot of places. It's very heartbreaking in certain places, but in a good kind of way. It kind of makes you realize the meaning of life and what exactly are we aspiring for. It just kind of delves into a deeper meaning of the book. So these are some of the aspects that I found in the book. So if you are thinking that it's purely a romance novel, no, it's definitely not. So you should also be prepared to read a lot of political stuff and all that. So the things I loved about this book are that it blends all of these things seamlessly together, and I absolutely loved those things. I loved the plot of the book as well, but in certain areas I felt that it was a little too descriptive for me. So I'm not someone who is too much into politics, so I felt like certain things were descriptive. But as someone who is not into politics, I also found that I understood a lot of things that I hadn't paid attention to previously. So it is kind of like you can see it as a pro, and a part of it is also a con. Okay, so that is one thing. Overall, I enjoyed this book. So I started off this book and I kind of finished it in like one day. It's a 300-page book, so I kind of stayed awake, didn't sleep till 1:30 in the night, and I finished this book. So actually I would have rated this book about 3.5 stars, but after that, when I went to that meet and greet, I got to hear a lot about the author's perspectives. So every single instance in that book, like every single significant instance in that book, it is backed by something. Okay, like let us say some huge calamity is happening, and just next to that you can actually see a sign of why exactly it is happening. Like, you can kind of correlate it, and I felt that it was very meaningful in the way it was written. So previously when I read that book, some of these aspects actually escaped me, but then, like, when I actually heard the author's perspective on how it was written, I felt that it had a very deep and meaningful impact. So overall I really loved it, and when I met the author, obviously he was very knowledgeable too. So since he has lived there, a part of these are actually his real life experiences, so he has also kind of blended those, like the initial parts of the book, it's kind of like, a little bit of his real life experiences. And when I got to hear his perspectives, I was like thoroughly amazed, and I felt my rating just go up to 4 stars, because I understood a lot of things that I previously hadn't paid attention to. So this is what I felt about this book. I rated about 4 stars, and definitely if you are someone who's trying to understand the political aspect, the scene in like the 60s, 70s and the 80s, a romance backdrop to add to that, and if you would like to understand the mythological aspect to that as well, I think you should definitely pick up this book. So it is something I loved, and yes, I would recommend it to others as well. Also, here's the trigger warning and the age appropriate for reading. So now let me take you on a tour of my meet and greet. I'm at MG Road Metro Station and I'm heading to Higginbotham's. It's just a 2-minute walk from there. And yes, here we go in. I'm just adding a snippet of the conversation with the author and the host, where the author is talking about how hemoglobin levels of women have always, been significantly lower when compared to men since historical times. He's telling you the reason as to why this happens, and also, though this part is not connected to the story, he's telling about how, like, when the protagonist of the story, that is Gautam, acknowledges when, all the women of his life have done so much for him, when he finally acknowledges that is when, he discovers his manhood. That is what the author is saying. So listen to this part of the conversation.
So after so many hundreds of years, you find the female hemoglobin 8.5 and 9. And females suffer all kinds of ailments. You see, their knees give up. Females suffer from knee failure. Do you know why? This is actually different from, not related to my book. Different context I am saying. Because males have been commanding the females for hundreds of years. Do this, don't do this. All rules for females. Against their wishes they cannot express. They have been holding themselves. And what holds the body? The knees hold you. Knees give up in fact of females. Actually this is told by my guru, not me. I am not discovering. So what I am saying is, females have been sacrificing for the entire family for the males. Males are not criminals, they are not sinners. But they don't acknowledge that. Because it's so commonplace, so routine, unless an event of monumental proportion happens. And because this fellow came to realize at a young age of 24 that 2 events of monumental proportions had happened to him when he was once 10 and maybe when he was 20. Age of 24, he realized that dawns upon him. Then he gets resurrected on an Easter Sunday, and his redemptive resurrection to manhood is complete as he acknowledges the feminine presence that completes his man.
While reading that part, I had goosebumps. After the conversation between the author and the host, the audience got talked to the Q&A where we could ask questions to the author, and then it went on to book signing. So not just that, post the session, the author actually stayed back and some of us stayed back too for exchange of ideas, which was pretty amazing. And I got to meet a lot of Bookstagrammers and we took pictures together and exchanged Instagram handles. So now that I was done with the meet and greet, I am going to be exiting Higginbotham's, which is obviously one of the popular bookstores in MG Road and in Bangalore. We headed off to Church Street, which is where Blossom's book house is, and I finally got into Blossom's now. I have done a detailed vlog on Blossom's Book House, and in case you'd like to check it out, I'll link that in the description and in the comments below so that you can click on it and check it out too. So one disclaimer that I would like to add is that my review is authentic and it is not influenced by anything. It is not paid or anything, and it is like purely my own opinion on this book. Thank you so much for watching. If you like my channel, please consider subscribing to it and also stay tuned for more bookish content. Bye.